When we think of horror's golden age, we think of the universal monsters, like Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman. Those characters defined horror in the 1930s and 40s. But horror didn't end there. Someone had to take the genre into a new era. And that someone was Vincent Price. He didn't just star in scary movies, he fundamentally changed the tone, style, and persona of horror itself, bridging the gap between the universal monsters and horror today. Now, today, he's probably best known for The House of Wax or House on Haunted Hill, or maybe even as the voice in Michael Jackson's Thriller. But before Vincent Price became the reigning king of terror in the 1950s and 60s, he got his start at a little studio called Universal. I'm Antonia Carlotta, and this is Universally Me, the channel for all things Universal and classic horror. My family started Universal Studios, and they made the Universal Monsters, and Vincent Price is part of their incredible legacy. Vincent Leonard Price Jr. was born May 27, 1911 in St. Louis, Missouri, into a wealthy family. His father was president of the National Candy Company, and his grandfather invented baking powder. So horror's future king came from baking royalty. Price's upbringing was steeped in culture. He attended Yale, he studied English and art history, but he found himself drawn to the stage. His first film role would come in 1938 in Universal's Service Deluxe, a romantic comedy starring Constance Bennett. Hardly the stuff of nightmares, but Universal saw something in him. The aristocratic look, the smooth voice, and a presence that could fit anywhere from period pieces to sinister corridors. The real turning point came a year later with The Tower of London, which matched up Vincent Price with Basil Rathbone and Boris Karloff, the monster himself. It's not exactly a horror movie, but it had plenty of darkness. Betrayal, executions, ominous castles. Price's character dies by drowning in a barrel of wine, and in retrospect, it's almost fitting, like a foreshadowing of sorts. And then came The Invisible Man Returns, the sequel to the 1933 film where Price finally took center stage. He played Jeffrey Radcliffe, a man falsely accused of murder who takes the invisibility serum to prove his innocence. He's invisible most of the movie, the same way Claude Rains was, but it gave audiences their first real taste of his unmistakable voice. By the late 1940s, the Universal monster era was fading. Almost every monster had sequels and crossovers, and the classic Gothic style was starting to feel old-fashioned. Audiences were shifting towards sci-fi creatures and Cold War paranoia. A new type of horror was brewing, and Vincent Price was the perfect man to lead it. In 1953, House of Wax exploded onto the scene, in 3D no less. Vincent Price played a wax sculptor who used corpses in his exhibits. His villain was articulate, charming, and calculating, mourning the loss of his art one minute and gleefully murdering the next. Across most of his career, Price didn't rely on heavy makeup or prosthetics. He used his presence. It was a real shift from watching a creature to watching a performance. And this was his first big contribution to horror, the shift from external monsters to charismatic villains. Price was most often not scary because of his look. It was because he was cultured, intelligent, and just a little too convincing. Now we enter the William Castle era, where Universal perfected atmospheric horror, Castle perfected gimmicky horror. He was famous for wiring theater seats to buzz during The Tingler and having skeletons drop from the ceiling during House on Haunted Hill. These movies could have been pure B-movie cheese, but with Vincent Price at the center, they became events. In House on Haunted Hill, Price plays a millionaire hosting a haunted house party with a prize for whoever survives. He's sarcastic, sly, seems to be having the time of his life. It's like he's winking at the audience. This was Vincent Price's second major contribution. He brought camp and self-awareness to the genre, but he did it without turning it into a joke. He let the audience in on the fun, and he turned horror into a game. And this would influence everything from Rocky Horror to Scream. The 1960s brought Price's artistic peak. The Edgar Allan Poe adaptations directed by Roger Corman. Films like The Fall of the House of Usher, The Pit and the Pendulum, and The Mask of the Red Death, which were low budget but visually stunning. Price played aristocrats haunted by guilt, tyrants consumed by obsession, and men unraveling from within. His performances are theatrical but deeply emotional. This is Price showing off his range, not just campy villains, but psychological horror at its finest. And this was his third major contribution, shifting horror from creatures to the human mind. Vincent Price was perfect for these roles. He could swing from quiet melancholy or charm to operatic madness in a single scene. And instead of watching an external threat, audiences reveled in watching someone implode. Modern psychological horror, think Hereditary, The Babadook, even The Shining, owes something to this shift. Price showed that horror could be terrifying and emotionally complex. By the late 60s and 70s, Vincent Price wasn't just starring in horror, he was horror. He spent the following decades appearing in series and films for both kids and grown-ups. The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, Mystery on PBS, Disney's The Great Mouse Detective, and then his final role in 1990 as the inventor in Edward Scissorhands. Where Bela Lugosi was forever Dracula and Boris Karloff was forever Frankenstein, Vincent Price didn't belong to a single character. He became the archetype for horror. Whether he was a serial killer or a haunted house host or the voice in the Michael Jackson Thriller video, he became the voice of Halloween. His very presence is horror. Now I think I can hear some of you through the screen. Karloff and Lugosi were horror too. They're icons too. Their faces are Halloween decorations. Their characters are immortal. Yes, absolutely. Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff defined horror in the 1930s, but Vincent Price redefined it. He took what they built and carried it forward into new territory. Vincent Price started his career at Universal, learning the ropes alongside Basil Rathbone and Boris Karloff, but he didn't stay in their shadow. Unlike Karloff and Lugosi, who sometimes struggled against their typecasting, Vincent Price leaned into it. He understood the power of persona. He wasn't simply acting in horror films, he was hosting an experience. Price made villains as charismatic as they were terrifying. He brought camp and wit to the genre. He shifted horror from monsters to the human psyche. And he became the walking embodiment of the genre itself. If you like these Universal and classic horror deep dives, make sure you're subscribed, hit the like button and the notification bell, share this video with someone you think wants to be stuck in a haunted house with Vincent Price, and don't forget paid members are getting bonus videos, pictures, and more. Plus, it's the best way to support Universally Me.